everyone, welcome back to my reading of Melissa G. Moore's Shattered Silence, the untold story of a serial killer's daughter. And just to clear up any confusion that may arise, the first video in this playlist is 4 chapters, the second is 3, and then the third one that I just uploaded that you should have watched before this one has 4 chapters. So there's 3 videos out. I just want to clear that up because in the last video I started reading chapter 7 not realizing I had already read chapter 7, and I left that tidbit in so you guys can realize that we did read 4 chapters the first time. So hope you guys got that, but just wanted to clear the air on that. So we're gonna be reading Shattered Silence. I don't know how many chapters we're gonna get through today, but I'm gonna try to get through as many as I possibly can. And I have a little bit more time to give today because I actually didn't procrastinate today and I did what I needed to do. So yeah. And I just want to remind you guys that I have my first podcast called Blurred Lines coming out. The first episode will be on the 18th, where it will be a weekly recap that I will be putting out every single week. This one is going to be a little bit longer because I'm going to go a little bit of the backstory on some stuff. So we are going to talk about like trashy TikTok and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. All right, but everybody, thank you so much for being here. And if you guys haven't already, if you guys have already watched the 3 videos of the first chapters of this book, definitely like, subscribe, and share them if you enjoy anything. And just as a reminder, I do live panels every Friday. So if you guys noticed anything or want to talk about what you heard in the book this week, we'll be doing a live panel. And we can talk about it. So definitely shoot me a DM if you're not a regular in my lives. That is the only way to get on panel. You can't just go into the live and say, hey, I want a panel, because I do take my platform seriously everywhere. So understand that. We're now on chapter 12. It's called The New Man. And just a little recap from the last chapters. Again, we see a lot of back and forth to where my dad is good, my dad is bad, my dad is good, my dad is bad, and a lot of flip-floppingness of stuff happening. So again, we see a lot of instances where it reminds us, it's very reminiscent of Gypsy Rose Blanchard's book, My Time to Stand. And just as a reminder, that is why we're reading this book, is because we wanted to see similarities, and we also want to see exaggerations, because so far, up until, you know, we've read 11 chapters already, we see a lot of exaggerations, a lot of things that from people that have been through similar trauma. Stuff is just not gonna, you're not gonna be able to recognize stuff that easily or that detailed, in my opinion, of course. So let's get to it, guys. The New Man. January 1991 stayed cold and windy, and my siblings and I bundled up every day the best we could for school. Some of the kids looked at me weird when I would wear lots of layers of clothing with no coat, so I pretended I was like the cool older kids who didn't want to wear a coat. I also made sure no one saw that my mittens were really socks that I layered for warmth. I carefully tucked the holy ones underneath my sweatshirts, hidden from view. Today, for a school language arts assignment, our class was supposed to write unique and unusual descriptions about our fathers. Some of the kids groaned at the assignment, but I thought that would be a fun one because my dad had a lot of interesting character traits, and I liked using big words. Really? Did you have to say that because you used a big word in the last 2 chapters? I had always thought my dad was a fairly normal guy, but I had most recently discovered that not everybody's dad was like mine. In fact, nobody's dad was even close. Fun and unusual things about my father. My father always has a pack of juicy fruit gum in his truck or car, and he let us chew on it as much as we want. Whenever we go anywhere with my dad, we can have any candy we want from the convenience store and delicious chocolate milk. My dad's favorite treat is donuts. He likes the rectangle ones with the brown frosting. Rectangle? Rectangle. trying to think what donut is a rectangle. Would it be like a bear claw or something? My dad carries a brown leather suitcase with black silky lining. All his grubby clothes are inside, and old pictures of us that have creases on them from being all worn out and loved and not being protected. One of the pictures of me is on a brown horse in my favorite Gladstone sweatshirt. Another crumbly picture is of him and my brother Jason standing next to each other with his arm around Jason's shoulder. Since my dad is really tall, my brother looks like one of those little people from The Wizard of Oz in the picture. My father always carries a big fat wallet in his back pocket, so he has made worn marks on his jeans that never came out. He has a big black comb that he keeps in his pocket too to comb his hair back. He likes to think he is as handsome as Elvis. He drives an enormous truck that we call his big rig. He could tell you all about what size the powerful engine is, all about the spoilers and the wheels, how fast it can go, and how many pounds it can pull uphill. All I can tell you is that it's big and it's a rig. When he is not in his huge truck taking product everywhere around the United States, he likes to watch football and Star Trek in his white Fruit of the Looms and eat peanut butter out of the jar with a large spoon. Sometimes he opens a can of sardines and I watched in disgust as he eats salty fish. When I was little, he gave me one to eat and laughed as I made faces. I have never eaten one since. Dad used to wear gold and black silk boxing shorts, and he would come home all bloody and beat up from competitions. We always asked if he won, and he always said he did. I would watch him hit the heavy boxing bag and watch it sway like it was as light as a fly. Then I would try to hit it too. It wouldn't move, but it hurt my knuckles. One, no stealing. He said that if I ever want anything really bad, to just ask him and he will get it for me. He says I never have to steal anything. 2, no smoking. He says smoking is horrible for you and to never start the habit. Some of the girls he likes smoke though. So she's writing this about like what's unique about her dad. So far, fun and unusual things about her father. So far, nothing really unusual. He seems like a pretty normal dude. And she's over here, before that writing, oh, he's so unusual. There is a little bit more to this, so I'm going to read the next portion to give my full thought on that, okay? I can think of how I wanted to end the paper. Thought of my father at the ATM, thoughts of him leaving us for Tony, and thoughts of his behavior a few weeks ago at Christmas invaded my peace of mind. I wanted this paper to be happy, like the home I wanted to get back to, like the family I desperately wanted. Maybe I needed to get out my thoughts so I wouldn't ruin this paper. Rubbing my hands together for warmth, I rummaged through my pack. It was almost as cold as our house as it was outside. Our budget was tight, so Mom said we had to keep the heat down. Keeping my jacket on, I sat down on the twin bed Carrie and I shared. I glanced quickly at the door and, satisfied no one was around, I pulled out my journal and began to write. Dad told me last night that he and Tony aren't doing very well still. He made it sound like maybe she has left him for good, even though he paid a lot of bills and for her and really liked her. I jumped in and told him Mom still loved him. I told him he should come back to us, that we love and miss him, and we should all be family again. I think he's thinking about it, and I'll have to work on him some more. I don't want him to get mad at me like he does Grandpa, but can't see that we're the best thing that ever happened to him. At least I'd like to think we are. I was thinking about my father when the weirdest feeling swept across my body. I didn't know what to think of it, but it made me shift uncomfortably on the bed. It was like a blackness, a deep and dark cloud, and I didn't like it. It felt kind of like how Dad had described the ghosts in Tony's house. He said it felt like something you never wanted to believe was real, but how could you explain what you felt when there was no other explanation? I shivered and a little creeped out and quickly turned on the radio to escape the gloom. As I began humming along on a popular song, I switched to writing in my journal about some things happening at school and a new assignment from my teacher that I was actually looking forward to. I carefully put my journal back in my backpack behind my math book with a couple of other notebooks so it looked like any other homework. Finally, I figured out how I wanted to end the language arts paper. One thing I really like about my father is that he is generous. My mother used to say that he would give the shirt off his back to someone who needed it. I think he should keep his shirt on because some people might not appreciate that, but I like how he really helps people. I like it a lot when he helps me. So, again, like, the praise to her father is at 100. Like, I know this is a assignment for school or whatever, but like, if you really like, it's not crossed my mind that she doesn't like her father right now. Like, she doesn't know what's going on, but I can already see this leading into her making it right to a point where she, in her mind, is going to later on say, oh, well, what he did was selfless or whatever. So, I mean, I know we're telling her story and all of this stuff, but again, Melissa's around 11 or 12 right now. I mean, I don't know if she's 11 or 12 because this claim that was another thing, is she claims she's in middle school. And usually I think it's like 12 you start middle school. So she can be around 12 or 13. So she is older, and this paper just reads, and I don't know, again, I grew up in the 90s, so I know I was very childlike and kids now are a little bit more adult. But the way she's writing this paper is very childlike, and it goes back to the notion of, if she went through so much trauma and had to fend for herself so much, she wouldn't have that childlike aspect to her writing or to just as a person. And again, that's solely my opinion, but I just don't see that happening and both of those things coinciding in my mind. It gives very Gypsy Rose. Like, Gypsy had to grow up really quick because she had all these illnesses, but yet she was still very childlike. It just doesn't fit. The puzzle pieces don't fit together. You get me? I digress. A few days later, Dad informed me that Tony had found another man. He wouldn't go into too many details, just called her a whore and spat on his end of the phone. He was already feeling blue because he was unable to work as a long-distance trucker. He said he had too many driving violations and had to wait it out for a short while. Instead, he was collecting unemployment, and he made sure to tell me that he was sending half to my mother, which meant he was broke most of the time. I was worried about my father, but one thing he wasn't used to: not working. Jespersons worked all the time. That's just what they did. And if they weren't working hard, they were playing hard. But he had sold off all of his hobby possessions for our Christmas money: his 18-speed twin Voyage bicycle, his fishing pole and expert reel, plus his lures and sinkers. I could tell from his calls he was frustrated and angry. I could also tell it didn't help when I reminded him once again how much we loved him and that he could get back together with us anytime. I actually wasn't sure how much of that was true anymore. Mom had hurt pretty deeply when he left us the last time. She never said so to us, of course, but I sometimes eavesdropped on conversations to gather information on what was happening in my own family. Sometimes it was the only news Jason, Carrie, and I could get. As a young girl, I had looked to my father as the authority to demonstrate how to navigate the world outside of our home. I had taken whatever he said as fact. He was wise and he could do no wrong, until he had broken my trust. When he left us, part of me locked him out of my heart so he would never be able to hurt me again. From that point on, I did not trust him. When my father lost my trust, so did every other man in the world. At some point, my father and Tony made up. One minute, they were never going to see each other again. The next minute, they were back together, thick as thieves, as my grandfather would say. My dad had called to let us know My dad had called to let us know excitingly, let me know the news. See, this is it's not me, guys, trust me. My dad had called to let me know excitingly, let me know the news. And I hung up the phone dejectedly. So again, here's another error here. My dad called to let me know excitingly, let me know the news. So like, why didn't you say my dad called and was excited to let me know the news? Like, what's going on? As dad returned to Tony and her two children, we went back to life with our struggling single mother. When dad kept up with his child support payments, it helped to make the rent along with housing assistance. Still, my mother had to pay for food, heat, water, gas for the car and phone bill, as well as the miscellaneous other expenses that always seemed to pop up in our household. Through a lot of miracles, it seems she was able to provide for us, even though daily affection was not shown to us. There was food in our bellies, and we had a safe place to sleep. I didn't know why mother didn't use food stamps like I witnessed other single mothers in the neighborhood doing. Perhaps she thought she was too classy, or she was too ashamed to walk into the welfare office. There was a part of me that wanted to question it, and even a stranger part of me at the time that wished she would have taken welfare so we could have all the yummy processed foods like the neighbor kids. After my father made his permanent decision to pursue his relationship with Tony, he would stop by Spokane to visit periodically. His Disneyland dad reputation was restored. It was play, toy shopping, and games the moment he rolled into town. At the slightest glance at our sparse cupboards in the old white painted kitchen of the Nordine house, he would take us on a grocery shopping spree. Dad made it seem like nothing was off limits to throw into the shopping cart. I would carefully watch his face for any signs of disapproval on my food choices. There never was any. Not even our favorite 5-gallon bucket of ice cream made him raise a brow. We chose the huge bucket of chocolate ice cream for the fact that this, at least, would outlast his visit. We would always have some after our final day with him. Jason, Carrie, and I added to the shopping cart boxes of Pop Tarts, sugary cereal, and all the expensive forbidden foods that our mother objected to. In a way, those sugary foods expressed to me a temporary sense of security. So, again, like, we're talking in a sense, again, I just feel like there's a lot of talk about this stuff, and I get that she's trying to be like in the moment and she's trying to give you exactly how she was feeling in that moment, but the thing is she's a grown woman writing this book. So there's some instances where she's like, oh, I know that now, or now I see that. But then there's other instances like this where she's like, I don't know why that happened, and it's just leading you on to continue reading. Again, there's chapters in this book that shouldn't be here. At most, this book probably should have been 20 chapters, not 41, in my opinion. Chapter 13, Murdered. On Sunday evening, I often found myself listening into conversations and newscasts in my grandmother's living room. Those evenings, there were never much going on in the neighborhood, since it was a day for family time in almost every house. The January snowfall made it more appealing to stay inside as well. One evening, my grandmother Frances was lounging quietly in the living room with her legs popped up to relieve the pressure on her varicose veins. I was spinning on the wobbly old and off-kilter recliner beside her. My grandmother was a very introverted person, so she didn't speak much. The good thing was that not much seemed to set her off to disturb her peace either. Therefore, I was not surprised as I swung all my body weight into the recliner next to her and started to propel myself in circles that she did not tell me to sit still. Grandma was very patient. Had my mother been sitting there, she would have scolded me to go find something else to do than bother her. She would probably have told me to go outside. It was in the wobbly recliner that I heard some breaking news. The tagline caught my attention long enough to stop the circular motion of the chair. I sat still, watching the gruesome images of a crime scene and the ongoing investigation taking place there. In late January of 1990, people in the Washington, Oregon area were disturbed by the discovery of a young Portland woman's body, found near the Columbian River Gorge. My attention peaked since the body was found in the region near my father's girlfriend's home. I worried a little that they might feel unsafe now that a murder had taken place so close to them. For a couple weeks, it was simply a small story of Jane Doe murder. As time went on, however, it turned out to be a big news when a couple was arrested and implicated in the crime. Investigators reported that in late January of that year, a young 23-year-old woman by the name of Tanja Bennett went to a local bar to shoot some pool, have a few drinks, and meet some new friends. She was described by those who knew her well as mentally slow and slightly retarded. That night, she became quite intoxicated, according to witnesses, and left the bar. She never returned home. I watched the television intently as the reporter discussed how dismayed passerby found her half-clothed and brutally beaten body just days later, where it had been thrown into the ditch of a steep ravine in the switchbacks near Crown Point by the Columbian River Gorge. So, this is not okay. In my opinion, this is not okay. Like, she's saying she's watching this, but she also puts it in her own words where she says January of that year, a young 23-year-old woman by the name of Tanja Bennett went to a local bar to shoot some pool, have a few drinks, and meet some new friends. She was described by those who knew her well as mentally slow and slightly retarded. That's not okay. So again, just not okay to go that deep to say like, oh, she was mentally slow and slightly retarded. She's a victim regardless of her mental state. An investigation took place immediately and her physical characteristics were described in the local news. It didn't take long for Tanja to be identified by her family. A small amount of additional information had also published, including certain aspects of the state in which the body was discovered. Strangled, badly beaten, only half clothed with a rope around her neck, and her lower lip punctured by one of her own teeth. At the time, it was a report that police had no suspects. I continued to stay informed about the Bennett case on Sunday evenings by watching the late news before the school week would start. Within a few weeks, however, local media reported that Laverne Pavlak, 57, and her live-in boyfriend, 43-year-old John Sosnovsky, had been arrested for the murder of Tanja Bennett. Pavlak claimed that Sosnovsky had forced her to help him R-word Tanja Bennett before he killed her. They were the only suspects in the case. Now, if you guys know anything about the Happy Face Killer, we do know that these people, for some odd reason, confessed to this. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but for some odd reason, they confessed to this thing. I thought it was really strange that an elderly woman was involved in an R-word and murder of a young woman. That didn't sit well with me because I didn't like to think that a woman, especially a grandmotherly type as the news described her, would be something like that. I shivered as I remembered my stranger danger classes in elementary school. We were trained that if we got lost, we should find an officer in uniform or a grandma with kids preferably. I tried to shake it off, but it reinforced the belief I was developing that I couldn't really trust anyone. I didn't pay attention to many of the outstanding details, but I breathed in a little relief. I was always happy to know when a killer was caught and sent to jail. I hated to think that someone would murder a young woman, might be on the loose somewhere. So crazy that you think this way, Melissa, because you know, a young woman that you believe gives you facts is now on the loose and is repeating patterns that she may do it. Doesn't that make you scared? Just wondering, just for research purposes, doesn't it make you scared that a young woman that had somebody kill her mom, that she's kind of feeding you lies about her past, that she's now out, that she's still now repeating patterns. Yes, I know this was made quite some time ago, but you would think that still, that would be in the back of your mind, that a murderer would be out and free. But I don't know. So that was a really short chapter. Maybe you made it short because you got embarrassed because you called a victim slow and retarded. I don't know. But just my opinion again. Chapter 14, Return of the Knowing. Life finally seemed to settle into a smoother and easier routine. Every morning I climbed out of bed, ready to tackle 6th grade. Every day I would come home to play in the neighborhood until bath time, and then it was straight to bed. It was all routine now, even sharing my bed with Carrie and my room with Jason. As a new little family, we were making it on our own. Over the last couple of months, I had slowly but surely given up on my father getting back together with us permanently. I learned to honor his journey, and I accepted that he wouldn't be with us except for occasional visits, between those visits and our new home. I did not think there was anything more we needed. The little brown rental home in Nordine Street was what had become permanent, and it felt like a place of safety. One early morning when the weather couldn't decide if it was late winter or early spring, I woke up to a really queasy stomach, not sure if I would make it through the day without the threat of spewing on the bus driver, teacher, or classmate. I decided to run the risk of missing school and went back to bed. My mother had left for work, Jason and Carrie had caught the bus, and the house was now empty and quiet. Missing any kind of school was a first for me. Confident that I was of age and therefore quite capable of taking care of myself, I knew I shouldn't be worried about being all alone in the house. Had I been worried at all, the flu-like cramping and nausea would have drowned it out. After I went back to sleep for a while, I felt a bit better. From the bed I shared with Carrie, I grabbed the large comforter and my pillow and traipsed out to the front room to lie on the couch. As I lay down, I was glad it felt less isolating out here. This way I knew I would hear my brother and sister coming home from school when it was time. I also knew I would be able to hear the noises of anyone else if they came by. I was wondering if I ought to turn the TV set on when suddenly my mind was filled with the image of a man trying to break into our home. I was defenseless. Over the years, I had learned that sometimes these images and pictures were not just reactions to my fear, but were valid. I attempted to relax, to tell myself that it was all in my head. But the fear made me anxious, and I had a hard time resting on the stiff couch. To make matters worse, there was a large clear glass square window cut right into the door. This made it so I could see anyone who came to the door. Unfortunately, that meant they could see me as well. I tossed and turned for a few minutes, but no matter what I did, I simply could not get comfortable with my pillow. I also could not put my fears to rest. I took my blanket and covered my head to block out some of the afternoon light and calm my racing thoughts. Finally, I began to relax. I was almost asleep when I heard a vehicle pull up in the driveway. Who could be here, I thought. Then I knew I am in danger. I must lock the front door fast. Through instinct and adrenaline, I jumped up quickly and locked the front door, then ran back to my blanket on the couch and hid. I heard the door to a vehicle close, and then it was silent for a moment. Just one person, I thought logically. Who could it be? I told myself that no matter what, I could not look out. Somehow I knew I had to stay utterly still. There was the noise of feet shuffling softly on the walkway and up the 3 stairs. Though I couldn't see anything through the thick blanket, I could feel someone looking in from the window in the door. At that moment, I was experiencing the same warning of extreme danger I had felt just a few times in my life. I remembered the flames on the bus and tried not to panic. Maybe I should run to a neighbor's house. Stay very still, said a soft and peaceful voice. Do not make one single move. There was no confusion about my feelings. I was not overreacting. I felt with absolute certainty that I was in danger, and there was a criminal right outside my door. But I also knew that I was not alone. I trusted the voice and did not move. Suddenly, there was a knock on the wooden door. I had to steel myself not to shake and tremble. Please don't see me. I prayed, grateful that my comforter somewhat blended in with the couch in the dim light. I stayed frozen in my position, hardly daring to breathe for fear that whoever was at the door would see the blanket move up and down with my breath. Not moving an inch, I waited for another knock or for the sounds of the person leaving. It was eerily quiet for a long, long time. There was no sound of the vehicle door opening or shutting. I closed my eyes inside the blackness of the blanket and willed myself to see what was happening outside. I saw only a momentary flash, but it was the image of a person looking for an open window or an unlocked back door. This time I really did hold my breath, praying with all my might that every window and door was safely locked. Just then, I heard the door to the vehicle open and shut. There was another long silence, and I stayed still until I heard the engine roar to life. Quickly but stealthily, avoiding the window where it was most wide and open, I carefully looked to see who had been at my door. There was a pale beige truck and my father's silhouette in the driver's seat. Mom had not mentioned expecting him at all. At that moment, I could have unlocked the door and stopped him from leaving, but the feeling of danger did not subside. I decided to trust my feelings and ducked out of the way so I would not be seen. Then I laid back down on the couch to rest. Later, I realized that at the time of the incident, it did not seem odd to me that I would allow my father, who I rarely saw, to simply drive away. Between the feelings and the peaceful voice that came to intercede, there was not a question in my mind that I had been in the presence of someone who would harm me. That knowing somehow overshadowed the fact that it was my father, not a stranger at the door. Later that evening, my father came back after my mother was home from work. He slept in our room, and Carrie and Jason snuggled up next to him on the floor. They moved the beds aside to fit them all onto a couple of sleeping bags. I did not feel the need to sleep with them, nor did I want to be close to him, so I slept on my bed that was pushed up against the wall. The panic and warning had subsided, but it had not fully gone away. How is it that my brother and sister do not feel uncomfortable? I thought. There was no reason to talk to them or my mom about it. Perhaps I was overreacting. It seemed I was the only one who did not feel the ease near him. It's kind of weird to think that she's now saying she's not comfortable around her father, but then in the last couple of chapters, again, we're within the same year of this happening. She says she's 100% comfortable with her father. Like, that's her safe place. Am I missing something? There was no way I could have known that just a few months previous to this, my father was in Tony's home, cleaning up blood that had splattered on the walls, or that he had just dumped a body near our favorite family picnic spot in Oregon. So, again, the mentally delayed, retarded woman, Tanja Bennett, was who he was cleaning up. And she didn't know this, but now that she's writing a book, she did know it, so now she's putting more instincts into it. Again, my opinion, but that's just what I see. In the spring of 1990, my father and Tony moved into her mother's ranch-style home in Portland, Oregon. The heartache continued for us when Dad picked us up to visit them that summer. When we all walked into her home, the cries of "Daddy, Daddy" rang in my ears and pierced my heart. It was torture for us to watch other children having a relationship with my father in the way we used to have before the divorce. So you mean the way that you had with your father when he would torture your kittens or burn them alive and things like that? Yeah. Now I was an observer to this new family in which I did not belong. It did not feel fair that they received my father's time and attention. When I would feel these emotions, I would get angry at myself, and this brought on a lingering question of my own worth as well as sense of shame. I felt shame for the thoughts and feelings toward this young boy and girl, and thought that I must not have been as fun to play with these children were, or Dad would still be with us. These feelings would intensify if my father was in a bad mood. "You're just like your mother," He blasted the remark at me more than once that summer, and it was usually right after he blamed her for something or had just finished complaining about what a horrible person she was. I could tell how my father felt about my mother, and being just like my mother meant that I was horrible, ugly person in my father's eyes, not worthy of his presence. My first impression of Tony as a mother were more accurate than I had imagined. I observed her through the weeks we stayed in her home, and she often yelled and treated her two kids roughly and harshly. It seemed they couldn't do anything right either. Sometimes Tony would ask my father to discipline her children, including spanking them, but he would refuse. It was up to her to discipline her kids. In some ways, I liked to see her children get a bum deal, but somewhere deep inside, I knew it was my jealousy talking. My heart hurt whenever they were yelled at, pushed around, or slapped. I knew that they deserved to be treated with patience and kindness as all children did. Things came to head when Tony tried to treat me as one of her own children, or even worse. She passed on to me the rough and dirty jobs on the chore chart. It seemed unfair that I was getting the toilet cleaning duty all the time, and she didn't withhold yelling at me whenever she thought I had made a mistake. However, she never touched my body or my siblings, and I think Dad must have laid down the law with her like he had with his father when he cons- when it concerned us. When I got home, I made sure I told my mother about the unfair treatment I received. Her expression never changed as I unloaded all the reasons why I hated Dad's girlfriend. My mother was obviously taking the higher ground, which is a great lesson. I only wish she would have commensurated with me just once. I only wish she would have commiserated with me just once. I'm trying to commiserate. I Guys, again, we're using big words. Like, why? Communicated. Why not just say communicated or acknowledged? I digress. I'm sure she was sympathetic, but only in an inner, silent way. From my mother's perspective, Tony had taken her husband, ordered her children around, and absorbed most of the financial resources my father should have provided to her instead. I knew the situation must have been obviously miserable for her, but if it were up to my mom, I would never know. But if it were up to mom, I would never know. So basically, she's stating that her mother didn't like have her back on the things that her dad's girlfriend was doing. But at the same time, you have to realize that when you grow up in a divorced household and you then start spending summers or weeks or weekends with that other person and they have another life, it's not within your control. And it's also, I mean, who's to say her mother didn't believe her? Like, she seems like she embellishes a lot. Like, she seems, even as a child, seems like a lot of things are embellished. So who's to say that her mom listened to her but didn't acknowledge it because she didn't know what was true and what wasn't at the time? And also, you have to remember, she's a single mom. She's not gonna go and beat up her dad's girlfriend or go and tell him off, because what's that gonna do? It's just gonna put more stress on her, and she's gonna have to deal with it that way. And it just, to me, it gives that she is also she's putting her mom in a worse light than her dad, than her serial killing dad. She's putting her mom in a worse light. And again, can I say this gives us a little bit of Gypsy Rose Blanchard vibes, right? Again, my opinion, but that's just what it gives us, okay? So I'm going to stop that here today because the next chapter, chapter 15, is kind of long. But we do go into one murder, which is of Tanja Bennett. And if you guys don't remember, what I had said at the beginning of this series is I will be doing a victim video here on YouTube after I'm done reading this. I will also do a deep dive on my podcast of the Happy Face Killer, Keith Jesperson. But I will be doing a video on solely on the victims. And this victim, if you guys haven't followed the Happy Face Killer, haven't seen anything on it, this girl was somebody had confessed to the murder beforehand, and they just took that as solid facts. And in fact, we'll probably learn later on, and we'll probably read about it, that in fact didn't take place. But I just want to remind you guys that Melissa G. Moore described, and this wasn't something she heard or anything, she describes Tanja Bennett as being mentally slow and mentally retarded. To me, that wasn't something she needed to put in there. To me, I think that that was something she could have left out, and it gives very, very insensitive vibes. Again, that's just my opinion, but it just gives those kind of vibes. So I hope you guys enjoyed the reading today. Again, next week I will be uploading 2 videos of the read. And again, next week on Tuesday, that podcast, the first podcast, the updates podcast, comes out. So definitely subscribe where you listen to your podcasts. It's not available everywhere yet, but I'm still working on getting that to you guys. Be sure to like and subscribe if you guys are liking this reading, and comment down below any kind of things I may have missed or things that you noticed that are interesting to you. I would love to hear them. But I'll see you guys next time, and we'll talk about it. Bye, guys.